huge thank you to Fiverr for sponsoring this video. My name is Meltori Franca. I am an author and the founder of Lost Island Press, and I have made quite a few videos over the years talking about the books that I ended up publishing. However, there is also a book that I have never published and have never made a YouTube video about, and it is a book that I started writing in 8th grade called Rant. I am reviving chapter 1 to send it to 5 editors on Fiverr. They're gonna see my name and maybe think that it's my current work, so I am quite embarrassed to be sending this, but we're gonna do it anyway. The first is Joseph. He is a published author of a dystopian thriller book, and his short stories have appeared in numerous anthologies and literary magazines. Start the order. Alright, now we have Lexi, who is a book editor with a bachelor's degree in English and minors in editing and creative writing. Gonna go ahead and start the order. I'm really nervous about this. This is not my best work. So next up we have Hannah. She's a published writer with a bachelor's in English and a minor in professional writing. Alright, here we go. Start the order. Now to our 4th, I believe, which is Nadav, a 28-year-old Amazon best-selling novelist from Los Angeles with 3 novels, a novella, and a short story collection under his belt. Let's get this order placed as well. Cool. And last but not least, we have Angie, who is a fiction writer and essayist based in San Diego, California, with a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. I'm gonna get this one placed. We should be all ready to go. 2 of the editors left more so copy edits, which were really great, but there's not really anything for me to say or react to in the video, so I'm going to be focusing on the responses from 3 of those 5 editors. Yeah, with all that being said, let's just dive into it. The cringiest book of my life. The 2 finalists were seated at 2 desks on the stage. In one seat was Rosie Cortez. She turned to the cheering crowd and spotted her parents, but quickly turned away. Rosie didn't want to look at them. After all, she was forced to enter Rant. I think with acronyms it's best to include the full name, unless you're confident most of your readers will know it. Angie says, love this acronym. It feels odd to me that we never learned what RANT stands for. I just never wrote it down, it's in none of my notes or nowhere on the document, so unfortunately, we will never know. Alan spotted his parents and waved. The girl couldn't help but feel guilty that she had taken the place of someone who really wanted to make it to the finalists. It feels a bit odd to introduce Alan for one sentence and then go back to Rosie. Back then, I really didn't know much about book structure and POVs and all of that. If we're flipping to a close third on Alan, I would stay with him for a paragraph rather than moving directly back to Rosie. I think that's very good practical advice if you're gonna have like an omniscient, how do you say that? Omniscient. Now I know. Suddenly, the light shone down on the 2 finalists. The host immediately pasted a fake smile onto his face. My humor has not changed since I was 13, apparently.
Welcome,
he said,
to Rant's 20th annual academic decathlon. Today, we've entered the final round with 2 contestants who have sailed at the top ever since the prelims.
The camera rotated toward Rosie.
Everyone, give Rosie Cortez a hand.
The crowd cheered enthusiastically. Joseph says, how else do you cheer? Avoid unnecessary adverbs. Solid advice. Rosie had a large fan base, as she had competed in smaller decathlons since she was a child. She still is a child. Her parents, however, simply stared with blank faces that masked the worry. The camera then switched to Alan's desk. It took all of his energy to stay calm over the excitement.
And to the right, let's hear it for Alan Callahan.
The slightly less noisy crowd cheered. We all love an underdog, right? He smiled, knowing that in the crowd were his parents, and back at home, everyone was watching. Mr. Bales promised to play the final round on the class television, and his cousins and grandparents wouldn't miss it if it cost them their lives. Very dramatic. These details are great. They let me know that even if the wider audience for these competitions isn't that big, the people watching are the ones Alan doesn't want to disappoint. I appreciate this feedback from Angie because current day me is very critical of the way that was written, so maybe it's not as bad as I think.
It's bad? It's very bad.
The last and final round is an essay writing competition. Competitors will write a compelling essay from the topic we provide them within 10 minutes.
Is it just me, or is 10 minutes really short to write an essay? Correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a long time since I've been in school.
When the essays are complete, the judges will review them, and the winner of this year's Rant competition will be announced.
Is the audience just going to watch while they write for 10 minutes, or do they have something else going on while they wait? Spoiler alert, they are going to watch. So is it knockout? Do all the previous rounds count for nothing now? Younger me had no idea how it worked. He made direct eye contact with the camera and widened his smile to an unnatural state.
Who will be the winner of this year's rant competition? Only one will win.
I just want to take a moment to really appreciate that frame. Like, just take a moment to sit with it. Huge props to the artist, LemonArt77. I love it. I love it so much. While the cameras ended the roll, Rosie and Alan were ushered backstage to where the situation was explained to them. Currently, the interviews with each of their parents were being broadcasted, and after those were the commercials. This felt anticlimactic to me. It's definitely, not a fun break in the tension. Backstage was nothing more than a narrow hallway with doors along only one side. The two of them sat down in the puffy seats and stared ahead of them. Rosie turned to her left and observed Alan. His eyes were clamped shut, and his arms were shaking on the chair's rests. He was nervous and a mess. Not he was a nervous mess, just he was nervous and a mess. Joseph says, "Cut this. You're showing the nerves adequately. No need to tell." She looked back at her own steady hands and gulped.
"You want to win this badly, don't you?"
Rosie asked. She kept her eyes locked on her own hands. Angie says, "Remove."
"You want to win this badly, don't you?"
It would be nice.
"Who are you competing for?"
Rosie still did not alter her trail of sight, so technically she's still supposed to be staring at her hands, I think.
"Who are you competing for? Your parents? A teacher?"
Alan thought about Mr. Bales and shook his head. He had recommended the idea of entering, but Alan wasn't doing it for him.
Myself.
Rosie thought about how much her parents had forced her to do this. She remembered how they made her study when she didn't want to, and when she had extra assignments to do at home, in addition to her private school's heavy homework.
"I'm not doing it for me."
Alan turned to her and shared a smile.
Look, I don't want there to be any tension between us.
He stared at the ceiling. So unnecessary. Why?
I know this is a strange thing to ask at this time, but how about we call a truce? No matter who wins, no hard feelings, alright?
Rosie looked him in the eye and smiled for the first time in all of her involvement with Rant. A lady popped out of one of the doors like a gopher. I genuinely love that line, actually.
"Both of you, to the stage, now!"
The two made their way out, and the crowd cheered once again. They sat down at their appropriate seats and smiled at each other before beginning. This brought relief to both of them. Angie says delete, it's implied. The host rubbed his temples so quickly that no one in the crowd could notice. Yeah, I'm telling you, my humor hasn't changed. Angie says, "This line was distracting for me. I wondered why the narrator chooses to show us this. Because the narrator is funny." The cameras rolled, and he greeted people from all over the nation.
Greetings! We're back at the stage of Rant, here with Rosie Cortez and Alan Callahan.
He paused.
Our 6th round is on essay writing. We're now ready to announce the topic.
The host took a few steps to the side, revealing the large screen behind him. Alan crossed his fingers that the topic would be about current events or science. When it came to essays, those were his best points. Rosie simply stared at the screen, her mind blank from thoughts. The device flashed a few times before the letters typed itself across the monitor. Creative writing. The crowd gasped.
That's right, folks.
The host seemed pleased.
We're taking an interesting turn and steering clear from the basic topics to something that hasn't been covered before. The unworthily rejected creative writing.
This is definitely me projecting and wanting to convince people that creative writing is so hard. Alan clenched his head. Out of all the topics, that was by far the worst one to be chosen. Alan was a fan of nonfiction, so creative writing was certainly not his strong point. Rosie, however, had immersed herself in a sea of literature ranging from the classics to the current mainstream novels.
This essay can be written about anything related to the topic of creative writing. But what the judges are really looking for is not particularly an essay, but a sample of creative writing itself.
Alan frowned. There was no way he could possibly write creative fiction. He rolled his eyes over to Rosie to catch her smiling.
The counter will now commence.
It started with the number 5 and slowly drained to the number 1. In that last second, the two finalists exchanged glances. There was no smile this time.
Begin.
Alan had the pencil in his hand and the paper in front of him, but he was having a difficult time coming up with anything. Before long, a minute had passed without the lead once making contact with the paper. Alan pinched his wrist.
Wake up!
He thought.
You didn't make it to the finals to turn in a blank page.
Rosie was firing away. The cameras were mostly focused on her as she made the most silly expressions as she was writing. Tongue sticking out, grinning with concentration, paint a vivid picture. Clips between Rosie, the crowd, and Alan were split up and diced together to try to spice up the 10 minutes of essay writing. Yeah, this is the problem with this kind of competition. It could be quite boring to watch two people write for 10 minutes. I'm sure the station this competition is on doesn't want to lose viewers, so they would need to do something to make it exciting. By 2 minutes, Alan had spurred some words onto the page. He invented a fake character and introduced him, but he had no idea what would happen in the story, and worried that he wouldn't be able to get anything done in time. Frustrated, he set the pencil down for a 10-second brainstorm. Rosie watched him, sensing his stress.
Alan, still struggling to get the words out on the page.
Alan shifted uneasily. The host narrating what was going on only made the weight of the air more and more dense.
Rosie just blasting away at that paper. Look at her go, folks.
This time, Alan watched Rosie as well. She stopped for a moment and caught his eye, but the two quickly turned back to their own work.
5 minutes.
Alan had now introduced one more character. Still, he lacked a plot. There was no possible way he could create something out of the piece of trash and succeed against Rosie. She was storming her thoughts onto the page, and something as silly and simple as creative writing brought Alan's blood to a boil. He didn't sign up to write fiction. He only studied the facts.
4 minutes.
Oh my god. This is my internal conflict of being a child who really liked creative writing but also really liked math. He'd only filled about 1 page in the given time, and he knew it was a piece of trash. This is the second time he's referred to his writing as trash. Relatable. With all of his muscles pulsing, Alan crumpled up the page and dropped it onto the floor. With less than 4 minutes on the clock, Alan completely restarted.
Things are getting interesting. Alan decided he wants a fresh start.
Mr. and Mrs. Callahan in the front row held onto each other's hands and squeezed them tightly. They worried not about whether or not Alan would win, but whether he would be able to live with himself no matter what the outcome. Poor Alan, this seems intense. I'm rooting for him to pull through. I love the contrast between them. Joseph says this is a bit overwrought. I know there's pressure, but it isn't life or death.
2 minutes.
Alan began zooming through the page. This plan was his last resort, but he had no other option. Rosie saw how fast he was writing and picked up the pace as well.
Now we're down to only 60 seconds.
Alan's face turned red as he used willpower and rage to propel himself to his concluding paragraph. So I was running really tight on my deadlines, but you know how I managed to publish Underground Royalty in time? A book down there, just released this month. You know how I did it in time despite my awful closing in deadlines? Willpower and rage. When the buzzer went off and the crowd sighed, both of them dropped their pencils and exchanged exhausted glances.
The contestants have finished their work, and it's now being collected for the judges.
The camera zoomed in on the string of judges. All of them were highly successful in either the business or educational fields. Delete and instead show us who we're dealing with. They're important. Okay, just trust me, they're important. One of them, Joe Barley, was once a semi-finalist in the rant competition 10 years ago. I like how we just have his full name. The contestants made their way backstage into their special seats once again. Special seats? The judges reviewed both essays carefully. Are they going to read them to the audience at all? If I were watching this, I would want to know what they wrote. Yeah, I completely didn't think about that, and that's so true. While the two sat in their chairs, Alan looked over at Rosie with eyes covered in a film of fluid. Delete. Just tell us he's holding back tears. He did his best to hold back the tears.
Congratulations.
His voice was unstable. Rosie frowned.
What's that supposed to mean?
I never studied creative writing.
He shook his head at himself in embarrassment.
I decided to write about mechanical harvesting instead. Even if it was well written, it was off topic.
She didn't respond. Instead, she rose from her seat and headed down the hallway, surveying the doors.
I'm looking for a bathroom.
Alan sat in the dark silence. Dust was everywhere, and he sneezed a few times. He rubbed his eyes with his sweater sleeve. He had not only lost, but he had embarrassed himself in the process. 15 minutes later, that same obnoxious backstage lady came out of one of the doors and shouted,
Contestants to the stage!
Alan turned to stare at the empty seat to his right.
Rosie Cortez went to use the restroom.
Alan Callahan, please head to the stage. We're going live soon.
But
Hurry!
Alan dragged himself to the stage without Rosie at his side. The crowd murmured, confused. The judges stared at Alan as if he had just murdered a cow. This threw me. After reading it, I began to wonder where we are geographically speaking. India? Another country or region where cows are sacred? I mean, they'd be shocked if he murdered a cow, right? Yeah, like if you kill a cow, that's still like a stunning thing to witness, right? Is that like a somewhat normal thing? Like you see a kid killing a cow. Like you don't have to be in like India for that to be weird, right? He stepped up onto the raised platform and stared into the sea of visitors. The judges cleared their throats and whispered among each other. Finally, the monitor from behind Alan flashed before displaying the winner's name. Alan Callahan, age 12. So did Rosie forfeit? Intriguing. Great cliffhanger. I'm curious about what happened with her. She ends up going missing. Everyone thinks that Alan murdered her so that he could win. And it turns into kind of like a murder mystery where he's hiding from the police. So that is the first chapter of Rant. I just want to take a moment to thank all of the editors who participated in this video. And I would also like to thank Benny Silver, who voiced the show host. He was also a voice actor in Too Late, which was a short film. And my behind the scenes video was also sponsored by Fiverr for that. So check it out after this video. That was a really fun project to work on. And last but not least, I would like to thank the other voice actors who played Alan and Rosie. All of the links to all of the sellers I've mentioned will be in the description below. Fiverr is a freelance platform where you can hire people from all over the world to bring your creative projects to life. You have copy editors, illustrators, proofreaders, designers, animators, tons of stuff. They have everything, even beyond the writing and publishing industry. Whenever I need to get something done and I don't have the skills to do it myself, Fiverr is always the go-to platform for me. And I'm not just saying this, I have a personal long-time history with Fiverr that goes all the way back to when I was in high school. I've been involved in over 200 projects as a voice actor, and I've also placed over 100 purchases as a buyer on the platform. If you'd like to try Fiverr for yourself, click the link in the description and use my code MEL10 for 10% off your order. Anyways, that's all for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, get lost.